Most people think that if you own a house, the law is on your side. I thought so too, until I returned from a 6-month work contract in Dubai to find a complete stranger living in my deceased father's $1.5 million estate. He didn't break in with a crowbar. He walked in with a fake lease, a smug smile, and a deep knowledge of squatters' rights. The police told me it was a civil matter. The courts told me it would take 18 months to evict him. But while he was busy recording TikToks in my father's living room, he forgot one thing. I am a structural engineer who helped design the very security and utility grid this house sits on. He wanted to use the law to steal my home. Fine, I decided to use physics to make him beg to leave. This isn't just an eviction story. It's a 4,000-word tactical siege. By the time I was done, he wasn't fighting for rights, he was fighting for air. Grab your headphones, because I'm about to show you why you never try to steal a house from the man who built it. The house on Willow Creek was more than just real estate to me. It was my father's life work. He was a master carpenter who spent 30 years perfecting every crown molding and every floorboard. When he passed away, I inherited the property. Since I was finishing a major engineering project in Dubai, the house sat empty for a few months. I had a security system, or so I thought. When I finally pulled into the driveway on a Tuesday afternoon, my heart stopped. There was a beat-up SUV in the driveway. The flower beds were overgrown. I walked to the front door, and my key wouldn't turn. The locks had been changed. I pounded on the door, and a man in his late 30s, wearing my father's old bathrobe, opened it. He looked me up and down and asked, "Can I help you?" I was speechless. I told him I was the owner. He laughed, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, and claimed he had a 5-year lease signed by a property manager I had never heard of. He knew exactly what he was doing. I called the police immediately. 2 officers showed up, looked at his fake lease, and then looked at my deed. One of them sighed and said the words that still haunt me, "Sir, since he is mail-delivered here and a signed lease, we can't forcibly remove him. This is a civil matter. You'll have to go through the eviction courts." I tried to explain that the lease was a forgery, that I had never met this man. But the law in this state protects the possessor. If someone is inside and claims they live there, you can't just throw them out. This man, who I later found out was a professional squatter named Gary, had done this to 3 other families. He knew that the court system was backed up for nearly 2 years. He planned to live in my father's house, rent-free, while he stripped the copper pipes and sold the furniture on Facebook Marketplace. I spent the first night in a motel, vibrating with rage. I called a lawyer, who told me the process would cost me $20,000 in legal fees and would take at least 14 months. Gary, meanwhile, was posting videos on social media about his new mansion. He was even inviting friends over for parties in the house my father built with his bare hands. That's when the engineer Alex took over. I realized that Gary was using the legal system as a shield, but that shield only worked as long as the house was a habitable dwelling. I went back to my father's blueprints. I knew every wire, every pipe, and every hidden access panel in that house. If the law said I couldn't remove Gary, then I would simply make the house a place where no human being could survive for more than an hour. I wasn't going to break the law. I was going to use the house's own biological systems against him. The siege of Willow Creek was about to begin, and Gary had no idea that the man he was messing with didn't need a court order, he just needed a wrench and a laptop. The first phase of my plan was environmental optimization. Gary thought he was entitled to a luxury lifestyle. So I decided to return him to the Stone Age. I didn't shut off the utilities that's illegal in a squatter situation. Instead, I tuned them. My father's house was a smart home prototype I had helped build. Everything was connected to a central hub hidden in a sub-basement that Gary hadn't even found yet. Using my remote access, I set the HVAC system to deep cycle. This meant that every 15 minutes, the house would switch from 55 degrees to 95 degrees. It wasn't off, so it wasn't a violation of the habitability laws, but it made sleep impossible. Then I targeted the water. I didn't turn it off. I installed a flow restrictor and a pressure modulator in the main line. Every time Gary tried to take a shower, the water would come out as a pathetic, freezing cold mist for 10 seconds, then a scalding hot jet for 2 seconds. It was a masterpiece of thermal discomfort, but I was just getting started. Gary loved his electronics. He was a professional squatter, which meant he spent all day on the internet looking for his next victim. I didn't cut the Wi-Fi. I redirected the router to a DNS sinkhole. Every website he tried to visit Facebook. YouTube, his bank redirected to a single page, a live stream of the front door of the house, where I had placed a massive digital clock counting down the seconds until his occupancy would become a liability. I also used the built-in Sonos speakers. I didn't blast music. That would be a noise violation. Instead, I played infrasound, low-frequency tones that are just below the level of human hearing, but cause intense feelings of anxiety, nausea, and dread. To Gary, the house began to feel haunted. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't shower, and he couldn't even distract himself with his phone. By day 4, Gary was looking haggard. I watched him through the security cameras I had hidden in the smoke detectors. He was pacing the living room, talking to himself. He called the police again, complaining that the house was malfunctioning. The police told him the same thing they told me. It's a civil matter. Call a repairman, but here was the catch. I had called every licensed plumber and electrician in a 50-mile radius and told them that the house was under a legal dispute, and any work done without the owner's consent would result in a lawsuit against their license. Gary was trapped in a $1 million prison of his own making. He tried to change the HVAC settings himself, but he didn't realize the thermostat was just a dummy unit. The real brain of the house was 6 feet underground, and it only listened to me. I sat in my motel room, watching him crumble, and I realized that the best way to beat a squatter isn't to take them to court, it's to make them realize that the house itself wants them gone. Gary tried to get tough. He invited 2 of his low-life friends to stay with him, thinking that more people would make it harder for me to harass him. He didn't realize that more people just meant more biological load for me to manipulate. With 3 people in the house, the humidity began to rise. I used the smart ventilation system to seal the return air ducts. Within hours, the house felt like a swamp. The smell of 3 unwashed men in a 90-degree house became unbearable. Then I initiated Phase 3, the maintenance loop. I filed a formal notice with the city stating that the house was undergoing emergency structural testing due to a potential foundation collapse. This gave me the legal right to place testing equipment around the property. I surrounded the house with high-powered, industrial-grade vibration sensors. These sensors were connected to tactile transducers, devices used in movie theaters to make the seats shake. I attached them to the main floor joists from the crawl space. Every time Gary or his friends tried to sit down or lay on the floor, the entire house would vibrate just enough to be incredibly annoying. Like a phone vibrating in your pocket that you can't turn off. I also initiated a light cycle. I replaced the exterior floodlights with 50,000 lumen stadium lights. I aimed them directly at the bedroom windows. Because they were security lights and I was protecting my property during a structural crisis, it was perfectly legal. Gary tried to board up the windows, but I had already installed magnetic sensors on the frames. Every time a board was nailed in, the house's security alarm, a 120 decibel piercing shriek, would trigger for exactly 5 seconds. Just enough to shatter his nerves, but not long enough for the cops to write a ticket. By the end of the first week, Gary's friends had abandoned him. They couldn't handle the heat, the smell, the vibration, and the constant psychological pressure. Gary was alone again, but he was stubborn. He thought if he could just hold out for the court date, he would win a massive settlement. He started recording a video, trying to document my harassment. I waited until he was mid-sentence, and then I used the smart lighting system to create a strobe effect in the room. In his video, he looked like he was having a breakdown in a haunted disco. I sent that video to his lawyer with a simple note: "Your client appears to be suffering from a mental health crisis. For his own safety, perhaps he should vacate the premises." The lawyer didn't respond, but I knew I was winning. Gary wasn't a tenant anymore. He was a prisoner of a system he couldn't see, hear, or touch, and the final blow was yet to come. The breaking point came on a Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after I found him in my house. I had saved the best for last. Using the house's internal plumbing clean-out valve, I used a high-pressure air compressor to create a backflow event. I didn't flood the house with sewage that would ruin my father's floors, but I created a siphon that emptied all the P-traps in the sinks and toilets. For those who aren't plumbers, the P-trap is what keeps sewer gases from coming into your home. Without the water in those traps, the raw, unfiltered smell of the city's sewer system began to pour into every room of the house. It was a smell so foul, so ancient, and so thick that you could practically taste it. Gary lasted exactly 45 minutes. I watched through the camera as he literally vomited on the porch, grabbed his one bag of stolen belongings, and ran for his SUV. He didn't even lock the door. I was parked 3 houses down. I waited until his taillights disappeared, and then I moved. I didn't just walk in. I came with a team of professional cleaners, a locksmith, and a private security detail. Within 30 minutes, every lock in the house was replaced with a high-security biometric system. I wiped the smart home hub and reinstalled a military-grade firewall. But I didn't stop there. I knew Gary would try to come back with the police, claiming I had illegally evicted him. Sure enough, 2 hours later, Gary returned with a patrol car. He was screaming that I had poisoned the air and forced him out. I met the officers at the gate, looking as calm as a monk. I showed them the city permit for the emergency structural and plumbing repair. I showed them the logs from the environmental sensors that proved the house had experienced a catastrophic plumbing failure, a failure I had graciously allowed Gary to escape from. I told the officers I'm so glad he's safe. The house is currently condemned for human habitation until the sewer gas is cleared. It's a health hazard. He can't go back in for at least 30 days. The police looked at the paperwork, looked at Gary, who still smelled like a sewer, and told him to move along. Gary tried to sue me. But my lawyer was ready. We countersued him for the damages caused to the plumbing and the HVAC system during his unauthorized stay. We used his own TikTok videos against him, proving he was using the home for commercial purposes without a business license. By the time it was over, Gary owed me $150,000 in damages and was barred from ever entering the county again. I spent a month deep cleaning my father's house, but I kept one thing: the high-pressure air compressor. It sits in the garage as a reminder. The law might have loopholes, but the house I built has its own rules. Gary wanted a free mansion. Instead, he got a 14-day lesson in engineering that he'll never forget. And I've never felt more at home.